I've lost her.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Yes, guys, I'm Si. Welcome to A.C.E Podcast Nation, the home of the Danny Batten Fight Show. This is powered by Violent Money. You can check out their YouTube channel, Violent Money TV, and of course, check out their website, violentmoney.co.uk, where you can get a range of training apparel, clothing, and training equipment, I'd imagine, as well. And of course, they had a new drop of clothes this week, where a collaboration with the Weekend Defender guys. And you can get 20% off at violentmoney.co.uk using the discount code ACE20. So make sure you give them a shout, follow them on social media, all that good stuff, and use the code and get yourself a nice discount or some very nice clobber. But also check out the Violent Money Academy on social media. It's the first smart gym in the UK, and we will have a virtual tour as soon as Cordy sends it to me. Come on, Cores. We know now. We're waiting for it. But it's on its way, and we'll have more information about that. But you can check it out on social media, their Instagram. They got loads of good stuff on there. But yes, indeed. So, we're live exclusively on YouTube this week, as I've been saying for weeks now. YouTube only show now for this one on a Sunday. So make sure you spread the word, tell the people. And, of course, the audio version, like all our other shows, available at the Sports Social Podcast Network, the UK's first dedicated sports podcast network. So you can find this show, Danny Batten Fight Show, all the previous episodes of the Danny Batten Fight Show, all the previous guests from Mighty Mouse to Paddy the Baddy to Jack Shaw, all the rest of them, hundreds of top guests, and all the other series and shows produced by A.C.E Podcast Nation. You'll find under their various names at the Sports Social Podcast Network. Again, tell them we sent you. But enough with the housekeeping. Let's get on with the show. Joining me tonight, as ever, is former Cage Warriors champion, UK MMA legend. It is none other than Mr. Daniel Batten. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm all good. All right, sign listeners. What a weekend we've had. Bellator, UFC, and a bit of boxing. Couldn't get much better than that, could it?
What a treat, mate. What a treat. There's so much to talk about. But before we get to all that, I'm delighted to welcome our first guest of the evening. She's a former K1 world champion and a former Welsh champion, current Welsh champion, former Welsh champion. Not 100% sure on that, so we'll find out now. But it is Lauren Wolfe. How are you?
Hi, guys. Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me on.
So, yeah, you can clarify that. Current Welsh champion, former Welsh champion?
Former. Yeah.
Former. Yeah, I see. As I said it, I was like, I'm not sure. Just can't trust my own writing, see, my own notes. So, yeah, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. So someone sent me a question. John sent me a question earlier in the week, and he said, have you got a nickname? Because he said, as MMA names go, Lauren Wolfe is a pretty awesome fight name. But have you got a nickname as well?
I actually don't have a nickname. Never had one. everyone
Don't need
calls
one,
me
I don't think, do you?
anyway, so
Don't need one.
stuck.
Good stuff. That's a good Lauren Wolf. Good. I like it a lot.
You don't need no other nickname with a
No,
name like that, do you? Don't need anything.
It's made for fighting, that isn't it?
Brilliant.
100%. So obviously you're a former K1 world champion, former Welsh champion, glittering in gold over the years. What's your kind of current plans going forward now? Is it staying in kickboxing or moving
So
on?
I am looking to transition into MMA. So I've been training with Shaw Mixed Martial Arts since around November, December.
Okay.
So yeah, hopefully looking to have my first fight later in the year. And take over the MMA scene.
Guess to add some more goals to the collection.
That's it. That's the plan.
So did you, before November, had you done like any MMA training, or was it purely sort of kickboxing and boxing that you concentrated on?
Yeah. So all kickboxing, boxing really. I started when I was 9. So I started out, the usual points fighting, then branched out into the full contact, and then later on into the K1 then, which
see, those tabloid newspapers would have loved you. A female fighting at age 8, they'd have had you on the front page. So how you say, like you said, you started at 9. How did you sort of come to get into kickboxing and a bit of boxing as well?
So I started doing, the usual sports in school, football, netball, nothing really I kind of stuck to for a long period of time. My dad then wanted me to start kickboxing, and to be honest, I was completely against it. But when I started, I loved it, and the journey continued from there then. I didn't like getting punched in the face at first. But
was it a bit of a shock to the system the first time you were?
Yeah, it was at first, but I think I need a punch in the face sometimes to kind of get me going. So
yeah, that's cool. So other sports-wise, you never really got into any others, really, or were you good at anything?
No, not really. I played netball for a few years in school, but like I say, nothing I really enjoyed as much as kickboxing. So I suppose at the age of 11, then when I went into comprehensive school, I put all my focus on that and started fighting then, I think, after about a year's training. So yeah.
When you say your dad made you do kickboxing, at what point did you think, hey, you know what, I'm going to go and compete? Was that your decision, or was that again your dad trying to be a little pushy?
No, that was me actually. I will admit, he pushed me to start. And it was more of a self-defense thing then, just so I could stand up for myself, really. But yeah, like I say, I had my first tournament then after a year. Tried it, loved it. My first fight was against a boy. So
oh right,
yeah, it was good. I think I had my first fight.
Yeah. Did you find it difficult? Was there many girls doing it, or did you find that you had quite a few fights against boys in those early years?
Yeah, in the early years, definitely. It was more boys than girls. I remember doing kind of a team fight as well when I was about probably 16. And again, that was mixed. But as I started, going into the adult categories, then there were more women to fight my weight, really.
Okay, so I'm interested in that. Like when you've gone find out that you're fighting a boy for the first time, did that bother you at all? Were you more nervous, or did it just, you were used to sort of sparring and stuff like that and training, so it wasn't too much of a big deal for you?
Yeah, I think I was used to training with boys anyway. When I started, Lauren Price was there. We had a few girls, but they were a lot older than me, so I didn't get a lot of opportunity to kind of spar with them. So yeah, my first tournament, it was quite intimidating stepping on the mat with a boy.
Interesting. I find it really interesting because like you haven't got a choice. It's kind of one of them things that, like, if the opponents aren't there, you've got to just fight. You've got to fight. Were your parents kind of nervous about you fighting boys and stuff like that, or was it just a case of it's what it is?
Yeah, I think my dad, he loves it. It is what it is. He's still nervous, obviously, but yeah, he loves it. My mum isn't too keen on me fighting. Um, she did come to a lot of my tournaments in the early years, but as I've stepped up, to the full contact, the K1, and now the MMA, she's taking a back seat, stays at home, and just waits for the message, really.
Yeah, I think do you know what, right? Like, I've got 3 teenage boys, and I get quite stressed out just watching them play football and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it can be quite like nerve-wracking and whatever, because you're helpless as a parent just watching. Like, you've just got to accept what happens. And I can only imagine that that's 20 million times worse for combat sports, because it involves getting punched and kicked in the face.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, yeah, the parents' is thankless job anyway. What about, like, obviously you're very, very good at kickboxing and boxing, otherwise you wouldn't be a world champion. But was it like instant, like where as soon as you started, you were naturally good at it, or did it take a lot of work to kind of get to that level?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was naturally gifted at the start, to be honest. It did take a lot of work. I think a lot of it was down to my mindset as well. I was always motivated. I always loved sport. You'd see some people come to the gym and they could kick someone in the head straight away. I'm not naturally flexible. Again, it's just, over the years where I've worked that the skills, I suppose, have developed.
It's interesting, like, Danny, as a coach, particularly with the younger age groups, do you see many sort of boys and girls coming in who are just naturally gifted and will just take it up and just instantly get it?
Yeah,
What's the percentage?
I definitely say you can get people who are just really well coordinated, but you quite often find the ones that are well coordinated had this natural talent. They're quite often the hardest ones to keep in the gym and actually get them to compete and take to full advantage of their natural capabilities, and they can be so frustrating. We got a young lad that started with us when he was 13, young Dennis. He's now 17, 18. Just started meeting girls, and now we just can't keep him in the gym. Absolute nightmare. But he was an absolute terror on the mats. Just started to really learn his striking, and he's turned to the devil, the dark side, and has allowed a woman to take him away from the sport. But it is so frustrating. He's so talented, but I just know, boys or girls, and normally the ones harder ones to fix. I think we've just lost sight, but we continue. And then, the other thing that I've noticed as well is sometimes it's down to personalities on whether someone's going to be achieving. And you said about motivation. I think that's a massive part of being able to achieve. So I don't think it would necessarily make someone be something more if they're talented and motivated. I think motivation is the key, and I think it's the easiest thing to control. I think with motivation, as long as you've got an able body, you're motivated, and you've got a good dabble of intelligence, I think people will achieve in any sport that they choose to put their mind to. But that's certainly what I found anyway with it.
It's a lot about the support system as well, isn't it? Like, my parents have always pushed me, and the team.
Yeah. I mean, that's another factor that could be taken into account. I mean, we've really been talking about just an individual student that comes in, but of course, who knows what goes on in home lives. There is to sort of say on that theme, I've had other young lads and young girls come in that come from very broken backgrounds, and that can be bearing on trying to keep them in training. And I have got involved on a more personal level as a coach, and therefore a friend of these youngsters that began to grow up, and I had dealings with their foster parents and their schooling and what have you. So for me, I could just be a pure coach, but I do find I quite often become a coach, a friend, and sometimes almost like a support worker, if you will. It literally can be like that. Maybe it's just my personality type that makes me feel compelled to do that little bit more, if you will. But yeah, that can certainly be the case as well. You obviously had really great support with your father. I was quite well supported in that fact that I had a dad that was really quite supportive and loves what I did and loves what I do. He loves following all the fighters that I coach now, and he's very, very motivated to stay in touch with the sport. Although I finished many years ago, 12 years. My goodness. Yeah. Oh, we can't hear you, Si.
No, I can't hear you.
Sorry, my internet went down. You say about time flies, mate. It really does. But you say about like that boy Dennis, Dan. Like, I was really, really good at football and cricket, and I played like representative level. But like as soon as I hit that 13, 14, I was just wanted to go out with my mates and girls, and that was it. Like I would always pick that over doing training. I was all right if it was a game, but like training, I just didn't want to do. And my dad would sort of almost force me to do it. And then once he died, when I was 16, like my mother had no chance because she didn't really want to push me because obviously I'd lost my father. And I kind of look back older now and I regret it. But I think it goes to show that like people like Lauren and like Jordan with you, Danny, and people who go and do these martial arts at the top level, they've got that dedication from a young age. And if you haven't got that dedication, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you haven't got the mental dedication to go and put your body through it and train and miss out on going out with your friends or going to a party or whatever it may be, even at that young age, it can make a difference, can't it? Because once you miss one training, it's like, well, I missed last week, so I could miss this week as well. I'll go back next week, and it just becomes a thing very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's timing sometimes, with these youngsters. I mean, Jordan was a classic example of someone that could have both, made it or not make it, in that he kept coming to our gym and then he'd vanish, for months on end. Then he would come back again. I mean, he was always training, but he was just going from one gym to another gym to another gym. Then he would come back again. And I was just noticing, hey, he's just not progressing. He keeps coming back and, losing all his rounds, and then going away frustrated, and then coming back again. And of course, everyone else was carrying on improving. He obviously wasn't going to the right gyms to incrementally improve him. And it was the time that I ended up having a word with him and putting him to one side. And these youngsters are either going to take note of it or not. And I think it's just hitting it at the right time. And I picked it straight after sparring when he was sort of like sat on the floor, all flaked out, and said, what are you doing, Jordan? Why don't you just pick one gym to stay at? So I don't care who you represent. And, it just worked. It was that sort of like firecracker up his butt to get him motivated in the right direction. And, fully take use of the skills, and he's an intelligent young man and very, very motivated. He was just going about it the wrong way, and he just needed that little bit of guidance. There's so many factors now, I think, for anyone to make it in any of the sports, including your sport of kickboxing. I think so many things have to fall in place. Champions are rare things, are rare breeds. There must be something kind of unique about yourself or anyone that's achieving any of these sports. That's certainly what I seem to find and notice about the sports that I've been surrounded around.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it's loads of factors really that kind of come together, especially when you're growing up. Like you say, there's going out with your friends and certain things you've got to miss out on. But I don't know. I always kind of got a good balance with that. I think training came first, and then obviously went with my friends then in my free time, like I do now.
Have you never had any sort of like interruptions or tempted for interruptions, such as going out? I mean, you young ladies go out as well as us guys when we were all young. Did this pull you away? And perhaps having relationships, is that something that's been difficult to balance with your life, or never been an issue for you?
With the going out, I wouldn't say so much. Again, I kind of kept a good balance there. I did have a bit of a break around, when COVID hit, really. Stopped training. I think I was just, again, needed a break. And then I started at, obviously, show MMA last November. And, that passion just came back. Loved it. So I knew that obviously I wanted to pursue it then. And obviously with me being 25, I think, if I'm going to do it now is the time, really.
Yeah.
How important, Lauren, is the relationships with your coaches? Obviously, before you were sure MMA, you'd have had, kickboxing coaches and stuff like that. Like how much influence do they have on you in terms of keeping you focused and making sure you go to training and everything? Like obviously when you're younger, I think the coaches tend to speak to your parents a lot, in terms of trainings on this day, because of the logistics of getting a child there. But as you sort of matured and got a bit older and into your teens and late teens, like how important was that relationship with your coach and the back and forth between you?
I think that's very important. I think it's one of the most important things, in the sport, really, the relationship with your coach. Obviously, like you say, as you get older, it's more you communicating with your coach rather than your parents. But I think it's having that trust, having that good communication, so that you can be open about your training, about any problems, and where you want to go, your goals, for example. Your coach needs to take that into consideration when moving forward. But I think it's really, really important you've got a good relationship with your coach, really. Like Danny was saying earlier, it's not just about being coach and student, it's having that kind of that friendship, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you got to trust your coach, haven't you? You got to trust. Yeah. I think saying that any sport, or even in a job or a career where you want to progress, you have to trust the person who's giving you advice and giving you the information that's going to take you forward in that said career. Because if you've even got like a little bit of doubt that what they're saying is, not 100% kind of technically right, or whatever it may be, like you're not going to buy into it 100%, and then you go, even if it's a subconscious thing, there's going to be a disconnect as you're trying to improve and you're learning. Do you remember, how old were you when you had your first title fight?
My first title fight, probably around 13. I'd say that was my first kind of world championships.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So where was that? Where would that have been?
That was in Germany.
Okay. So 13 in Germany, away from home. Like, what was that experience like, both sort of out of the ring and then also then in the ring competing at that, in a foreign country for the world titles?
Yeah, it was amazing. The further afield you travel as well, it's always the case, there's more opponents. But yeah, I think I entered a points fight in, obviously the continuous kickboxing we called it, and we had kind of a low kick K1 on the mats as well. So I won gold in all three categories. I found quite often when I was a kid as well, I had to kind of move up categories due to there being no one in my weight, or if I was at an intermediate level, I'd have to move up to advanced, or failing that, I would often fight in adult categories when I was 13, 14. So I think all that paid off as well. I was fighting more experienced fighters, and it definitely helped.
Like, how daunting is that first fight against an adult when you're 13 years old?
Yeah, it was quite daunting. I remember being in a category as well where I had to fight a girl from my club.
Right, okay.
And she had an amazing sidekick. Chamber was by her chin, and it hurt. But yeah, like I say, it was all good experience, win or lose. I wasn't taking the easy fights, so just helped me improve then, get back in the gym and work on. I suppose they were role models to me at that age, so it was good experience.
Yeah, I mean, were you like a bit of a sponge in terms of, like, say you're fighting an adult, were you trying to learn from them all the time?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the main goal was to go in there and win, but
yeah, of course.
Yeah, yes. Taking things from them fighters, maybe things that I did wrong that they were working around. I tried to implement that into my training going forward then.
Like, it's got to be difficult, no matter how good you are, which you clearly were. Like, it's got to be difficult for a 13-year-old to face an adult in a fight, because an adult has naturally got a bit more, maturity, and an adult just looks at the world differently, don't they? So they're going to look at the the point scoring system differently to what a child is going to do. And I'm sure because of the situation and the tournaments you were fighting, and I'm sure you were pretty, you had your head screwed on and you'd have been pretty mature for a 13-year-old. I'm looking at it because my youngest boy's 13 and I'm thinking, I can't imagine him fighting an adult, but obviously he doesn't do kickboxing, so he's not in the same situation. What was your kind of like your win-loss record like as you're doing all these tournaments in those early sort of, say, I don't know, like 12 to say 16, 17? Were you like winning most of your fights?
I'd say the early years, again, that's where I started fighting the adults, the more advanced fighters. So it was a bit of a mixed record there, but as I'd say probably 14 to 16, I was getting gold in the majority of the tournaments I was entering. Okay. I couldn't even tell you how many tournaments I've entered. It's got to be, close to 100. We were fighting every week, some months. So, but yeah, I'd say certainly, I think, like you say, the more I matured, I think the more you mature, the more your brain clicks on in terms of the fighting and I suppose the tactical side of things, rather than just going in there and kicking and punching. You're actually thinking about, what you're doing.
Yeah, you're a big advocate for people to get used to competing by competing as much as they can. Because one of the things I try to encourage MMA people to do if they don't come from a background of competing is to, try and compete in some jiu-jitsu tournaments, some no-gi tournaments, do an amateur kickboxing fight to coincide with their MMA fights. Because sometimes waiting for MMA fights, depending on what the weight is and whether you're female or male, can be quite depending on how often you can get to fight and therefore gain the competitive experience. So I think competing in MMA is one thing, but I think that competitive maturity, like you just said, when you start doing it regularly, you start actually acting on tactics and implementing game plan and so on and so forth. Would you say you're a big advocate on competing, even if it's different formats, just to get used to competing in itself?
Yeah, definitely. Like even when I was fighting on the shows in K1, like you say, it's quite difficult to find a fight at first. Then you have pullouts, but yeah, I was still doing, the kickboxing tournaments regularly. And like you say, the more you do it, you get used to, the adrenaline, the nerves, the crowd. Just think, it has to be done for you to kind of stay at that level, I suppose.
What's you'll have to forgive my ignorance a little bit with the kick differences in kickboxing and MMA. Like K1, is that the equivalent? Like that's like professional kickboxing, yeah? Pretty much,
yeah,
is
so
it? Or
K1 is. So there are three different styles mainly that I competed in. So you had the points fighting, which was Michael Page, that style of fighting, your side kicks, your kind of point scoring really. Obviously you had your full contact kickboxing then, which, fought in a ring. K1 then you had the implementation of knees, clinching and knees. So just different rules really.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, like, how big an opportunity was it for you, and when you got the opportunity to fight in K1 in those shows, because they're quite big shows, some of those, aren't they?
Yeah. So I did some K1 in the World Championships. One of the good tournaments was the Whyte Dutch Open. Mm-hmm. So that was I think that was my first K1 fight, so that was a good one to kind of start me off. And then I fought on Stuart Davis's show, the WTFC in Weston.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a big opportunity. I had a Five Nations title fight against an Irish girl, and then a K1 fight Commonwealth against Spanish girl. Which I came out short of that one, but yeah, it was, a massive opportunity for me there to get into it. And obviously I suppose that kind of helps with the transition into MMA with the knees and, that I suppose it's a more aggressive style of fighting really. So yeah, it's good.
No one for your mum to watch you in that one then.
No, definitely not.
Have you had many opponents or any opponents where you've had like a bit of a dislike to them, or there's been a bit of a rivalry, or is it generally just very sport and martial art orientated, so it's all very respectful? And
I'd say the majority are respectful. They show good sportsmanship after and before, but you do get the odd few that perhaps don't shake your hand at the end of the fight, which I don't like personally. I think, respect before and after. Leave all in.
So have you ever had to fight anyone you didn't like?
Yeah. No names mentioned, but yeah.
No elaboration.
Like I say, we were both respectful before and after. There was a bit of rivalry there. I'd say more so between the coaches, perhaps, but yeah.
In MMA, one of the things that you will have to face, I mean, being that you're with Shore MMA, there's no doubt you're going to move up the ranks and become a name. And certainly as you get a name, you start getting these bigger and bigger personalities that start, writing things on social media, and or if it ain't going to be the person you're going to be competing against, it'll be their teammates and so on. How do you think you would deal with that? Someone, perhaps almost getting a little bit personal. Do you think that you could sort of like just have it as water off a duck's back, or do you think you could easily take things personally and maybe go in there with a little bit of real anger and not just competitive spirit?
I think, to be completely honest, I am quite a chill person, so I probably wouldn't be too bothered by that. I wouldn't take too much notice of it. Just leave the fight and do the talking and see who comes out on top.
Best way.
Like that. What has been like the biggest difference or shock to the system or anything like that since you've been going down to Shore MMA and doing like the MMA training?
I'd say the wrestling has been the hardest to get into. Like Steph said, they do a Shark Tank, so 9-minute rounds. Loser stays in, which is always me at the moment. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's been I think the hardest thing for me to adapt to. I think I've picked up the BJJ quite easily. I've obviously still got a massive amount to learn, but I am picking it up, week by week, and I'm enjoying it also. That's the main. And I always say, I don't want to be known as just a striker. I want to, develop in every area. And I think that's the best way to be. And I think that's, the way most fighters are going these days.
Yeah, I think these days you have to have a certain level of everything, because there's there is the odd one, people who are like good strikers or just good strikers, but generally everyone's good at everything, or certainly got a familiarity with each sort of aspect of it. It's interesting. So you said about the Shark Tank rounds and that, and you're kind of the loser stays in, so that's you at the moment. Obviously, that means you're getting a lot of practice and stuff. But in the long term, that's going to be good for you, isn't it? Because you're constantly working on your skills, but it's also you're working on your fitness and everything else within it. Like how difficult is it for you to? Because obviously you're used to being exceptional at kickboxing. So how difficult is it to now be doing some different things which you're not exceptional at yet, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it is a bit strange, I suppose, being the small fish in the big pond again, but yeah, it's good. I know Steph said exactly the same thing, but we always say wrestling is that session where you come out and you feel like you want to cry, basically. Mm-hmm. But like you say, it's good for me in the long run, not only for fitness, but when I'm in groups with people like Bevan Hall, Liam Davis, they really, really good wrestlers, and they do help me out as well. So that's a big thing. Like I say, the team you've got around you. So yeah, it's good. Yeah,
there's some unreal minds and names to work with. Not just the obvious ones, the bigger names within Shore MMA, but there's some exceptional amateurs and new professionals in there who are, to train with those guys and girls every day is only going to make you better in the long term, I think, isn't it?
Definitely.
So in terms of MMA, like you're looking to get a fight in before the end of the year then, is it?
Yeah. So hopefully perhaps October time. Look to maybe get on the Cage Warriors Academy. I know they've got a show in October in Ebervale. So yeah, hopefully going in. We're going to look at doing a few grappling tournaments beforehand as well. You know, like I say, just to get that ground time in and get used to competing in that environment. So,
have you done any grappling tournaments yet, or?
No, I've done the Interclub at shows back in March, I think that was, or February. But yeah, that's the only one so far. I did a Nogi Jiu-Jitsu match. So yeah, just looking to keep busy really and get the experience in.
How did you find the Interclub?
It was good. I was nervous because obviously it was my first. I used to, being in that pressured environment with the crowd and, having the nerves before a match. But I think it was because it was something new to me. It was that bit more
different feeling, isn't it? Different feeling completely.
Definitely, yeah.
And I find I'm really interested by it because obviously you're a world champion, and then you're learning these new skills, which is it's a different mindset. What type of learner are you? Are you someone who learns from kind of repetitively doing these things and losing and doing these things day in, day out? Or are you someone who can sort of do it a couple of times a week, but then also get the feedback verbally to improve, or a bit of both? Or
I think it's like you say, that repetition really. I think I've got that mindset again from the kickboxing that you just need to, drill. And that's how you pick things up. Like you say, making mistakes in training as well. So, defense. I've been working on a lot with some of the guys recently. Triangle defense, for example. And I think it's just a case of, repeat, and you will get it.
Interesting.
And obviously Shaky is shit up with the jiu-jitsu as well. So I always say to whoever I'm training with, when Shaky kind of shows you the drill, it never sticks in. But when I do it then 3-4 times,
you kind of put it all together.
Yeah.
I just realised, Dan, Lauren is our third Shore MMA team member in a row.
Oh wow!
We had Steph, then we had Josh last week, and then we had Lauren.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't even realise until just now. But there we go. So on that, last week with Josh, we discussed Jack Shaw, and we felt like we all agreed he was kind of maybe being a bit underrated by some people in the UFC, and he wasn't in the rankings. And then the very next morning, he was number 15 in the rankings. Richly deserved, way overdue, I think. But it opens up some interesting matches. Danny, who would you like to see him fight? Like when you look at the sort of names.
Who have we got? I'd have to have a look at who's in there at sort of like the next few spots up. Obviously, I don't want him jumping straight in top 10 or anything just yet.
You got Ricky Simone, I think, is just above off the top of my head, and then you've also got Sugar Sean O'Malley. But I think the UFC will keep Jack and Sean O'Malley
away from each other,
miles apart, because they're like their future golden boys of that division.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're going to put them against each other, or at least if it was me, I wouldn't. I'd be saving that for later down the line, definitely. Ricky, I'm trying to load it up on my screen, the rankings. Ricky Simone is the one which I think I looked at and I was like, that looks like a good one. It's a couple of rankings above, be a good fight. But there's a couple of guys there which look like they could be quite interesting fights.
I think initially, have we lost him? We lost. Sorry, Dan.
Go on.
Yeah, I think I initially would like to see him either fight someone like just perhaps a position or two positions above himself, or possibly someone that's perhaps dropping down from the top 10 and heading back out. Maybe they've kind of reached a peak with their career. and no longer firing on all cylinders. I think there's a few fighters in the lightweight divisions that they're sort of like hitting that age where perhaps they're not quite, as shiny as they once was. And I think that would be a great scalp for someone like Jack Shaw to take. Are you back with us, Si?
Yeah, mate, I don't know what's going on. My computer's dipping in.
I was just saying to Lauren, I think they sort of two sort of like, rather than picking specific individuals, I think a good career move would be either to do it the standard way, which is you pick one person or two persons above you in the rankings, and you take them on, or perhaps get someone that's no longer firing on all cylinders, as I described it, or not shining as much as they originally once was, perhaps coming out from their peak that's got legendary status, because I think that'd be a massive boost.
Here's a name for you then. Here's a name for you then. I'll tell you where he is now, but Frankie Edgar. That's one which I was like, because I said to you, I think it was probably about 4 or 5 months ago, didn't it? We were talking about Jack, and we said about him having a bit of a legend killer gimmick almost, and just like put him in there with the legends, because you've got all sorts of legendary bantamweights in that division, which would make for incredible fights. Because obviously I think Jose Aldo was in that.
That's right. Yeah, he was mentioned.
You've got Frankie Edgar and all these people. Right. Finally got it to load up. So you've got Jack Shaw's 15. Straight above him, you've got Marlon Moraes, which is that's a good fight. Be a good little grappling battle. And then you've got Sean O'Malley, which I think we're crossing off. And then you've got Ricky Simone and Frankie Edgar.
Frankie Edgar will be an awesome one. But the sad part of that, although good for Jack, I think my money would be on Jack to win it.
Yes.
But, sad thing is, I think that would be the final nail in the coffin for Mr. Edgar. And sad, but I think it's been a while. His time's been coming.
Yeah,
can't take the shots.
This is what happens, mate. Isn't it? Age gets us all, mate. Lauren, I wanted to quickly talk to you before we let you go about Tyson Fury's performance last night. As a striker yourself and a kickboxer, like, what do you make of Tyson Fury? Because the man is 6'9", but moves like a lightweight. It's really weird to watch, and I can only imagine that it's weird to fight against, particularly for someone like Dillian Whyte, who's quite short and stocky.
Yeah, I said exactly the same thing to my father watching it last night. He just moves so quick for a heavyweight. His footwork, his head movement is brilliant. But I think he looked pretty comfortable for the duration of the fight, really. Picked him off. And the uppercut was, I think, just textbook, wasn't it? So quick. Just happened so quick.
Well, do you know what? I watched the first angle I seen it at. I didn't think he punched him. I thought he had just pushed him, and then it was only they showed one replay, and it just looked like he had glanced him, and then it was the final sort of replay they used.
Yeah,
and it just saw his head snap back. Really, it was so quick the camera didn't even catch it at first glance, and it was impressive.
Yeah.
Danny, do you reckon he'll retire, mate?
I don't think he will retire. Oh,
Lost him.
Are you back?
I think he's going to fight AJ before he retires.
Yeah, I agree. AJ or Usyk. I'd like to see that. We can't hear you, Si.
If he doesn't have that fight against the winner, there's always a question mark, especially if Joshua beats Usyk. There'll always be a question mark over that fight, even though I think Tyson Fury wins, and I think Tyson Fury wins quite handily. There'll always be a question mark. So it's... Yeah,
but this is the issue, though. No matter what happens, there'll always be someone else that will come up out of interest that we'd want to see him against, and in which case he'll never retire. But
that's the one. Like, that Joshua fight's been around.
Yeah, I can't help but think there's still wonderment on I think we know what would happen to a point regards the result, but I think we want to know how that result might present itself. I mean, I think we're all in the same camp of thinking Tyson Fury wins against Usyk or AJ, but we just wonder how that might go down more than anything else.
I got a friend, Alan, who owns Away Day Apparel, mate. He said to me about probably 2 years ago, must have been at least that he said he thinks that Usyk will be the future champion of the world. He thinks Usyk beats Tyson Fury because he said he just thinks he's got a bit of everything, speed, power, etc. I think Usyk's probably too small to beat.
That's what I think. He's like 6'2", isn't he?
Yeah, he's a cruiserweight, isn't he? By sort of by trade, but it's fascinating because I do think Usyk is going to beat Anthony Joshua, and it's such a shame that they didn't get that Joshua Fury fight done when they had it sort of nailed on, because obviously Joshua went and lost, and I got a feeling he might lose again, and that fight's dead then, because they'll never do it. It'll never have the same attraction and whatnot. And then just to finish us off on it. Obviously, Ben's going to talk about it in more detail in a sec. But just 2 minutes after he said about retiring, Francis Ngannou came on the screen, and they're talking about fighting each other. Now, if he does retire, I wouldn't be surprised to see him, do something like an exhibition with Francis Ngannou, even though I think it's largely pointless. And I don't really like these kind of exhibition. I don't know, they're not aimed at me. Like
they're a step away from reality, isn't it? It's
even with these guys, Ricky Hatton's doing one, isn't he? And Mike Tyson.
Yeah, but I don't mind that, because that's Hatton and Barrera. These are two former legends, and it'd be great to see these type of people move around again. I don't mind that so much, but I think when you're getting an MMAist against a top-ranked boxer, and it will always drum up interest. That's the thing. I mean, we're just taking it from our perspective. I mean, there would be plenty of people tune in and pay money to watch it. But I sit in the same camp as you, Si. I don't get the idea of it just being exhibition based, because it's just not real. It's just two guys having fun. The big name's got a big following and getting paid incredible amounts of money. But maybe I'm just jealous. Why don't no one want to fight me? You keep saying I'm a legend. No one picks fights with me.
Too scared, mate.
Fury is. I read something about him going into WWE as well. So who knows?
Yeah, he had a stint in that before, and also they've got a show in Cardiff in September, a pay-per-view, which they'll obviously be looking to get, I would imagine, either Conor McGregor or Tyson Fury involved in. They usually do. When they come to the UK shows, they had Wayne Rooney do something on one of them a couple of years back, pre-COVID. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Tyson Fury turn up in there either, because he did something with that. So look, even if he retires from boxing, I'm sure, even though he says he hates fame, I'm sure that we'll see him again in some fashion. So Lauren, we're going to wrap it up there for you. Really appreciate you joining us this evening. It's been a good chat. I find it really interesting. It's been for me personally, it's just been kind of cool to talk to a kickboxer and predominantly, rather than kind of where we used to speaking to MMA fighters or boxers and stuff like that. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a good chat.
And Rod, before you do go, what weight are you going to be competing at? What weight would it be?
I'm going to be 65 amateur,
right?
But hopefully they're moving down to bantamweight.
I see. Okay.
I go through, hopefully.
Yeah, excellent. Good luck.
Dan, what does Hayley fight at?
She fights at 48 kilos.
Okay. So what will that be? What will that be pro? That's flyweight, is it?
I think. Yeah, I don't know. You have to look. I can't remember the names of them. Atomweight. They're tiny. It's. I don't. They haven't got that weight in UFC yet. Put it that way.
Right. Okay.
I can't remember being that weight. Can't remember being that small.
Yeah.
Right. Lauren, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And
Thank
you're
you both.
more than welcome to join us again in the future. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks.
Good luck.
Ta-ra. And straight away, we are joined by the man himself, boxing pundit, author, and of course, trainer, Mr. Ben Doughty. How are you, Ben?
I'm good, Simon. How's it going, guys?
You're right, Ben.
It's been an interesting week, mate, on the boxing front. Oh my days.
Yeah.
So we just talked a little bit about Tyson Fury, just more about him retiring potentially. So I want to get your input on that. But before we do, Ben, I wanted to ask you about the MTK situation, because that seemed to turn about. I know it's been like an undercurrent of it for a while, but like the closing down of MTK seemed to happen very quickly.
Yeah, I was really surprised, Simon. I mean, it just folded like a deck of cards, didn't it? It was just, I thought it was astonishing, to be honest with you. I thought, though, whatever had been set up was more robust and would withstand an awkward situation and some negative publicity, but would make it through it. I really did, But I mean, obviously, I didn't know too much about the workings, did I? Because I posted an article from the Times saying MTK may fold without further ado, kind of headline in the Times, and I thought that's a bit of a kind of prick up your ears or eyes kind of headline. So I shared it, and then I deleted it like 10 minutes later because I'd seen the statement on Twitter from MTK saying, owing to unfair scrutiny since the US sanctions on Daniel Kinahan, we are ceasing operations at the end of the month. And I just thought, well, and I know lots of people who are involved with that company or on the payroll. I know a few anyway. I mean, my friend Spencer Fearon, for one, who ran the charity fund. Lee Eaton, a friend of mine for quite a few years, an associate of mine I've worked with on certain things. I mean, Lee, his story is quite interesting because he started as an unlicensed promoter only a few years ago. I mean, it comes up as a Facebook memory a few years ago, something like 2014. He said, I'm thinking of doing a white collar show. Is anybody interested? Next minute, he's a major promoter with MTK and, kicking it with Bob Arum and the like, So Lee said he was gutted, best 6.5 years of his life. But, it'll be interesting to see how these, not to mention the fighters, the 200 fighters or so that were on the books, and they're all looking for new deals and new arrangements and things. But it will be very interesting to see where it leaves a lot of people. And also people have also linked IFL TV with the brand, obviously, and wondering if it will have any impact on their continued success. Personally, I wouldn't have thought so because they're in a slightly different position, aren't they, as the kind of media heavyweights that they are, Coogan, and his
they get a lot of interviews, don't they, with the MTK guys. So I mean, I guess that's going to have a certain amount of impact. But then I suppose it depends. It all comes down to if they set those interviews up through MTK or if they set them up with the fighters and the personalities themselves. Because if you set them up with the personalities and the fighters themselves, it doesn't make any difference.
I wonder what's happened to him there, Danny, because I noticed Simon had frozen.
He froze.
He was still talking, but
I don't know whether you were seeing any of the podcasts before, but this has been happening like every 15 minutes or so. He's been dipping out. He's obviously having issues with his Wi-Fi.
Let me keep filling in because we can keep it coherent.
Yeah, we'll just keep going. Yeah, we can keep going.
But like I said to you both a second ago, I was very surprised how it just happened like that. And the other interesting thing, Danny, is that Probellum, which is like a kind of seen as a sister company, it's also seen as a company that very much had connections to Daniel Kinahan. They are under scrutiny. They lost their TV deal, I believe, with I think it's this Eurosport, which is linked to Discovery and Disney. I believe there's some link there, which are major US companies. So they had a show on Friday night in Liverpool, which wasn't televised suddenly, and they had to transmit it, broadcast it on their website, probellum.com, whatever it was. They are under scrutiny. And what it seems to me, guys, is that they're not the authorities in question, because the Irish government have pursued, what they call the Kinahan Organised Crime Group, the alleged Kinahan Organised Crime Group. They have pursued them mercilessly and relentlessly forever. I'm aware of that, but they feel like they felt like they were kind of talking to themselves a little bit, and the rest of the world, particularly the boxing world, they said we're just turning a blind eye and saying he's a jolly good fellow, okay? And now the Americans have got involved. It's been such a game changer, as you can see by. MTK for him was massive. Probellum are under scrutiny, and it's a bit like they're not going to have the simple thing where they say it's all right, we'll just say he's not involved, or we will just, they'll just rebrand. It looks like they're not having that now, that they really want to smoke everybody out who needs to be, brought to justice as they see it. And that's what you've got at the minute. Obviously the UAE froze Kinahan's assets the other day, which is, that's bank accounts and whatnot in Dubai. There's already got the sanctions in the US. Some of the people who know much more about it than I do, the Irish journalists who've stayed on this case for a few years, because they said it was such a slow burning story, and now it's just gone crazy this week, really. And some of them seem to think that he'll be arrested sooner rather than later. I've got no idea, and I've got no horse in this race whatsoever. But that is what some people are saying. You will have seen Tyson Fury get annoyed with the Sky interviewer.
Yes.
In the final press conference, saying, I've told you 3 times, and I will not be doing any more interviews with Sky. And he constantly said, it's none of my business what people do, or what another man does. It's not all I do is box, But obviously, other people said, no, you were the one who shouted him out and said, thanks to Daniel Kinahan, he's made the biggest fight in boxing history. Just got off the phone with him, and so some people are saying you can't have it both ways, but it's going to keep moving, that story, even though it's not strictly related. It's not entirely related, shall I say, to boxing, but that one, there will be more developments yet, and we'll have to see how the chips fall.
With the Fury interview, I thought the reporter asked the same question over and over again, and I think that's where the irritation was, because he didn't seem to mind answering the question initially.
No,
he gave an answer, but then it was like he kept, every time Tyson tried to move it on to the box, to the Saturday's fight, he from
a professional point of view, I think it wasn't the right technique. I would never have done that. You know what? I don't think I'd have asked the question once, guys, not because I'm afraid to ask it, and not because I'm not a searching interviewer. I absolutely am. But with you guys, you're always interviewing me, but I do interviews, and I will turn my hand to that, not a problem. But I don't ask things which I think are a complete waste of time and I hide into nothing, and are just going to mess up the rest of your interview and maybe get you excluded from getting what you need. You have to walk a bit of a tightrope. There's no point being so bold and so controversial. Also, if all you're trying to do is ruffle feathers to make a name for yourself, that doesn't strike me as journalistic integrity either, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't have asked the one question, but I certainly wouldn't have asked it several times, because all that's going to happen is at some point he's going to get the hump, and you're not going to get what you. I asked Frank Warren once about Terry Marsh, right? Okay, most people know that subtext, and he said to me, and I asked the most innocent of questions. I just said, did you notice that he was your first world champion, as it turned out? Did you notice that potential in him from the off? Did you think his career was going to get headed that way? Or was it a surprise to you? I just thought I'd gently start the conversation. And he shut me down straight away, saying, I'm very short and sweet on that. He won a world title under me. He defended in his hometown. I put up the money, and I don't want to talk anymore about Terry Marsh. And I said, that really is the end of it, isn't it? And he said, and he didn't even speak. He just did that twitch that he does with his neck. And I was like, okay, we will move on. And that's what you've got to do with Fury, and you can't really blame Fury as well. If you're doing an interview with him another day when he's not in camp, maybe you could try your luck with that if that was what you wanted to do. But what's he going to say when he's like 3 days away from a fight?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know, Ben? What I found quite fascinating about the Kinahan thing is this all seems to have gathered a lot of pace since it was announced that he was doing that interview with James English, and then it got pulled, I think, the day before or a few days before, after they put the trailer out. And then that seems to have been around that time. I don't think that the interview was the catalyst, but I think the timing kind of coincides coincidentally.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Like I say, it is. Things have changed very quickly, because even the way we're talking about it now, to be honest, because of the reputation of certain individuals around this story, if you'd have asked me about this when everything was a normal status quo as it was a month ago, I probably would have said, well, you know what, and I know some people involved and they say X, Y, and Z, but it's not something I've got a huge opinion on, and it's not something I wish to discuss at length. And that's just common sense, and that kind of vaguely streetwise nous, not to put yourself in a silly position, particularly when you don't have a horse in the race, and particularly when you don't have an awful lot of knowledge about the inner workings of something. Whereas we're talking about it now a lot more freely than than perhaps we would have done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's difficult not to talk about it when it's been it's been a big story, obviously. With the fighters from MTK, Ben, just to finish us off on that, where do you think, is it just a case of them finding a different, group to represent them, or will MTK turn up in another, under another name, as we see often with other companies?
I watched Off the Ball Sports, which is an Irish sports podcast that's pretty prolific with videos, and they talk about Kinahan a lot. And the guy called Kieran Cunningham, who's someone I didn't know his name before this week, but he's obviously quite well versed in this whole story and has been pursuing it for a while. He says he really doesn't think that's going to be as simple as that. He says that people have previously suggested they'll just rebrand and they'll pop up somewhere else under another guise, but I think that's going to be quite difficult at this point. And also, why he said it, and I don't know if it's right on quite what he said. He said he thinks that Kinahan and some of the other people on that sanctions list, their chief priority right now won't be boxing promotion, but it will be avoiding the authorities and maybe even escaping Dubai. I've heard that Nicola Tallant, who's an Irish journalist, is quite notorious for pursuing the Irish gangland figures like the Hutches and the Kinahans and other guys back in the day. She did an article, I think it was today, about how the wags are all having to go, to leave Dubai, or will be having to leave Dubai, and their luxurious lifestyle is crashing down around them. And there's an element, I think there's an element of gloating in Ireland because people in Ireland seem to have the more negative view on this whole phenomenon. And there is a sense they feel vindicated, probably in a certain way that Barry McGuigan might feel he's been vindicated, or certainly people are saying he's been vindicated because he spoke up when the documentary was aired February last year on BBC Panorama. Do you know what's funny? I've got to tell you this one quickly before we get onto the fight itself. There's a few journalists who've written searching pieces recently. Matt Christie of Boxing News was pretty vocal in his editorial this week. Donald McRae, who is a fine writer who writes for The Guardian, I think it's The Guardian anyway, and has written books on the sport, and one very good book called Dark Trade, which I recommend to anybody. So Donald McRae is a man of integrity, a man of letters and integrity. He has said some, he's been very outspoken about the Kinahan thing lately. He said they found themselves last night right in the media section, which isn't actually even in London. Never mind in Wembley Stadium; it's so far away. You know what I mean? I'm exaggerating with the dramatic effect, but they found themselves, and I know the section because I was there once for Froch Groves 2. And if you're really fancied and one of the big hitters, you're at ringside. Apparently, I'm not told that's the way it is. But he found it. They put a lot of the YouTubers and people like that in the Kugan Cassius doesn't have to sit in there, but they put a lot of the second division journalists in the media section, which is actually, you have to watch it on a screen to see it properly. Well, Matt Christie, editor of Boxing News, the oldest boxing publication in the bloody world, Donald McRae, fine writer, and a bunch of other people were all sat in the media section. He said they needed binoculars last night. And somebody said, what a view. You could say it's panoramic, as in panorama, etc. Yeah. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's interesting that's where they ended up, isn't it?
Yeah.
On to the fight. Obviously,
before we get on to the fight, I just wanted to throw this one in. It's kind of on topic to what you've previously on about with Tyson getting pissed off during the interview. Did you see what happened with Tyson on the plane?
Oh, Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson.
Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, Mike Tyson. Yeah. What was your take on that?
The kid looked like a real idiot. Like
annoying.
Really...
Yeah. You see, he's proper scuffed up on the head, wasn't he?
Yes. And I think if it's that old analogy, if you keep poking a bear with a stick, what do you expect to happen? I think with Mike Tyson lately, his new image, he's almost reinvented himself to a degree as this still crazy but chilled out old grey bearded fella guru who loves to smoke weed and likes licking toads' heads and stuff for the transcendental, development it gives him. And I think this is the old Tyson kind of story. Like Tyson goes berserk and loses it on plane and attacks civilian. But I think because his rebranding is so strong now, most people are really sympathise with him and be like, "Oh, poor Mike, he can't even travel in peace. What an idiot! I hope he doesn't get sued over this." That's what I'm hearing. I feel the same. It looked to me, if it was all totally genuine, it looked to me like they're just a complete idiot. I think social media has created, and phones and all that has created, I think, well, we don't have the respect we used to have for some of these icons. You know, some people don't anyway. Because somebody said to me, if I'd have seen Larry Holmes on a plane when I was his age, whatever, I'd have been like maybe nervously gone up to him or asked the hostess, could I please go and speak to Mr. Holmes, please? You know, you wouldn't be like digging him out the way that guy was. And
yeah, shocking.
you know, and I think, no, I hope it doesn't result in anything too serious for Mike, because it wasn't really his fault, was it?
No, I totally agree. I just wondered where, because I've met Mike a handful of times, or say when I've met him, you know, within touching distance, and some of the people I was with were speaking with him directly. But he had, you know, bodyguards around him, and had a lady that you would go and ask, "Oh, can I have a picture with him? Or can I say hello to him?" You had to go through this lady. Now, I'm kind of like a bit bewildered that there wouldn't be security around him in some way. Maybe there was, but I didn't see him with the incident when it unfolded.
To be honest, when I first saw it, I thought, "Is this even real?" Because it just looked a bit bizarre, didn't it? The whole setup, like you say. I mean, he's not. Yeah. I think mega celebrities like that don't always. There's always a time when they're less kind of protected and surrounded by people. There comes a point in their life when that's the case, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. It can't have hit him that hard either, because otherwise he would.
No, it looked like he was almost body shotting him at one point. It looked like he was going for his head solely, was it? But I mean, he could have done the kid real damage if he wanted to.
It was frustrating. It was frustration, wasn't it? They were like little rabbit punches, just almost like just leave me alone. But like, the first video that I saw of it was from the guy. So the guy was sort of sat behind Tyson, and the first video I saw of it was for the guy who filmed directly on the other aisle to the guy who was annoying him. And I only saw the build up to it, and then he cut to the cuts on his face, and it didn't show the fighting. And predominantly, what this guy did was I think he was drunk or whatever, and he just literally was just annoying him and being quite rude and abusive. But it was constant. Like it wasn't like say something, a couple of minutes go by, say something else. It was a constant badgering of him. And you mentioned social media. What I think social media has also done is given people the impression that they can say whatever they want to people with no consequences.
Yeah, which doesn't work if you're actually in with him.
No, especially in a closed space.
I think the last straw was apparently from something that I'd read, because I tried to look into it more. And
he threw a water bottle at him, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think that was the bit where he thought, "Hey, enough's enough," so it's been thrown at me here, and that's when he stepped it up. But, you know, again, you know, not to harp on about this subject, because I kind of take you off on a tangent here, Ben, but I'm always just curious of your take on things. There was an incident, wasn't there, just a matter of weeks ago, again with Tyson, where a gun was drawn.
Yeah.
Did
you see?
No, what happened there? I didn't.
It was like a theatre show or something. I think it was like a meet and greet he was doing, and a guy. I'm not exactly sure the reasons, but a guy was in the queue. Obviously, there was a lot of people there, and he pulled a gun. And Mike Tyson left his space. I
think he was drunk, wasn't he? I think the guy was drunk, and they said, "No, you can't come and meet him." And he goes, "No, I'm going to meet him." And the security tried to push him away, and he pulled out a gun. But Tyson was just dead calm. And he goes, "Let the guy come over." And the guy put his gun away, and he hugged him, shook his hand, and then he got kind of walked off. He got what he wanted. But it didn't seem to bother Tyson. When the gun was
he's had a gun pointed at his head before, Tyson. You know, he's famously, Teddy Atlas pulled a gun on Tyson, and nobody disputes the story. I'll tell you this one quickly before we go on to the other Tyson, more than man at the moment. But Mike Tyson was, when he lived in the Catskills with Cus D'Amato, and Teddy Atlas was training him as the kind of D'Amato's kind of protege, understudy. That was who Atlas was. Still a young, very fiery guy at the time, Teddy Atlas, not someone to mess about with, to be honest with you. Then Tyson supposedly sort of vaguely molested, or he crossed the line with a girl who was underage. It was Teddy Atlas's niece, I believe. She was family anyway. She was family. She was only about 13 or 14. She was definitely under the age of consent. And Tyson, by his own admission, grabbed her butt, as he put it. Now Tyson himself cannot have been very old at the time. He can only have been about 16. I won't.
I see.
But he was the man boy that he was. He was just this, this walking monster. Even then, physically, he was like Mighty Joe Young kind of thing. And he supposedly grabbed this girl, by the behind, enough to shake her up in a way that she was crying about it to Teddy's wife. And when he got in, he happened to hear her saying, "Whatever you do, don't tell Teddy. Oh, please don't tell Teddy." And he heard that and got in and said, "Don't tell Teddy what?" And then obviously he found out, and he just got himself a gun, like a pistol, whatever it was, handgun. And he waited for Tyson, I think, outside the gym in Main Street, Catskill, whether he was leaving it or whether he was just coming there. I think he was just arriving, actually, Tyson. And he just took him down the alleyway, put the gun to his head and said, "Don't you ever, ever interfere with my family again, you piece of shit. You understand me?" And Tyson admits it happened too. Tyson describes it in his book. But what Mike says is that, okay, Teddy's made a lot of mileage out of that, milked that one, he says, but I wasn't really that scared. He said it wasn't the first time I'd had a gun held to my head. That's what Mike says.
Yeah, I mean, Tyson, from the little I know of Tyson's story, I think he's got quite a lot of violence within his upbringing as a youngster, I believe.
What people say who knew the story closely, they say all this kind of thing that he went off the rails. He said, nah, Mickey Duff says, this his words, not mine, he was rotten from the start, he said. And there was a lot of things hushed up in terms of importuning females, of whatever age. And that they hushed a lot of stuff up, but they came to a point when they couldn't do it anymore. But the idea that he fell off the rails and his behaviours started getting wayward. They were saying it was always a battle to keep him on the straight and narrow. But what they did before he was too rich and famous and before he was champion was to keep him constantly active. He was fighting literally every 2 weeks at one point, But Mickey Duff said he was always a problem. And people said women in particular are Mike Tyson's Achilles heel and they will do for him.
Right. Interesting. Obviously, the big fight of the night last night was Tommy Fury versus.
I'm glad we can get to that finally.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Come on, let's get to the Tommy Fury fight. What did you think of his performance?
Tyson, right?
Yeah.
I thought, you know what? Yeah, I mean, I think Tyson Fury did a great job. I think Whyte looked pretty limited. Juxtaposed with him in that ring. I mean, it was interesting how Dylan came out southpaw in the first round, and I did think that was interesting because there was all this speculation that Tyson might come out southpaw, and Dylan did it, which I thought was whether it was useful or not, I thought was a really nice touch. I thought Tyson Fury looked a little bit kind of tight and a bit cold in the first 2 rounds. I didn't think he found his groove and started looking confident and kind of self-aware until the 3rd round. But once, from that point on, he dominated the fight. And I think Dylan, far too slow of foot and wasn't putting his punches together well, I never for 1 second thought Dylan Whyte was going to beat Tyson Fury anyway. I kept an open mind on, how competitive he might be for as long as it lasted. I even entertained the fact that it might go the distance. But, what's funny? I was watching on a stream last night, and I know you shouldn't encourage this, but to be fair, we weren't going to go to the fight because Natalie didn't fancy going out that night or leaving home. He tried to buy it. Natalie did before I got there and couldn't buy it because sometimes that's actually quite a hassle trying to buy it from BT Sports if you don't have BT Sports, and she doesn't. So in the end, ended up streaming it. There's always a way, isn't there? But the stream is sometimes a little bit behind the action. So what I posted in the 6th round, I posted, "Can't see Dylan getting to the final bell as the way things are going," and people going, "Wow, Mystic!" Maybe 10 seconds later, "Wow, Mystic Doughty called it, Ben." And I was like saying to Natalie, he must have got knocked out in a minute because people were all saying, "How did you know that?" And we were still seeing relatively normal action. I was like, "It's gonna," and it got right to the end of the round, and he nailed him with that uppercut. So, I didn't know. I knew it ended before I knew it, just because of how people were reacting to that particular post. But it is what it is, isn't it? I mean, I don't think it was ever going to be. I never expected the upset. He's beaten Dylan Whyte. Some people are reaching for the superlatives today, or they were last night as well. I've got certain thoughts on all of that. I mean, it was business as usual. Take away the historical crowd attendance and the massive hype around it. It was a routine defence by a WBC heavyweight champion. he beat a solid contender who earned about what he was worth, by the way, despite all that talk of lowballing and skullduggery. Dylan got paid pretty handsomely for a decent contender who's not quite of that level, certainly not, of the level of the guy that beat him last night.
So, Ben, Dylan Whyte, I saw a few people on your social media in the comments and on social media generally, a lot of people saying that people felt like in the build up to the fight, he obviously missed press conferences and stuff like that, and his kind of attitude, and also in his walkout, he just looked like he didn't want to be there. Whereas Tyson Fury looked like he was, just embracing it, and he looked ready and he looked pumped up for it. Do you buy into that? Because I thought Tyson Fury made Dylan Whyte look quite average for a lot of the fight. But do you buy into the fact that maybe Dylan Whyte was kind of purely in it just to get the money and get out with it?
No, I'm sure Dylan wanted to win that fight. I'm sure he absolutely was a culmination of his dreams, and also, never mind, let's remember the money he can earn afterwards, because he could have, he can still earn big money, by the way. Dylan Whyte isn't finished. He wants to get going, and I don't expect him to announce his retirement. But the money he could have earned had he won last night, would have been astronomical. And I think he went into the fight confident, expecting to win, believing he could win. And it just didn't happen because, at the end of the day, he's just not as good a fighter as Tyson Fury. He's not. I said to you, I think probably beforehand, I certainly said it. I said it on an American podcast. I remember that I asked myself, what does Dylan Whyte do better than Tyson Fury? And I couldn't really think of anything. And I said maybe he's a harder one-shot puncher with either one of his hands, his Sunday punch. I said, but I'm not sure. And I think you look at last night. There's no. I mean, Tyson Fury is a big one-shot puncher when he feels like it, as you can see.
He didn't Dillian Whyte get hit with a similar uppercut against Povetkin? Is it Povetkin?
Yeah, Povetkin. Yeah, it was similar, but it was from the other hand. I mean, he got people. All the experts today are saying, "I've just discovered that Dylan Whyte is vulnerable to uppercuts." Like it's the X-Files or something. I mean, he was stopped by Anthony Joshua with an uppercut. It seems, to be honest, I'd forgotten the punch that ended that fight from 2015, but people are saying it was an uppercut. They also, obviously, I remember Povetkin hit him with jab, slip, left uppercut. That's how it went down. Okay. Whereas Fury last night hit him with the rear uppercut with the right hand. So they're similar, obviously, insofar as they come from underneath. That's what an uppercut does. And that people are saying that I guess that counts, that he's susceptible to that shot. But whether he was or not, I mean, the uppercut is a question of how are you going to avoid it and what do you need to work on. How do you block an uppercut? Well, the best way to block an uppercut is actually that cross arm thing, like the Ken Norton thing. I'm trying to get both my arms in shot there, where it's a strange start to take, and obviously it leaves you vulnerable to hooks because they're coming from here. But that's the best way to block an uppercut. You can lay back from it, that's about it, really. So, the uppercut is quite hard to defend against because they say the punches that really mess you up are the ones you don't see. And the uppercut is one of the ones that's most plausible that you wouldn't have seen it, I think, anyway. I think you can see straight shots coming, you can see hooks coming. I think the uppercut is the sneaky shot of the 6 basic punches in boxing, right? You've got the 2 straight shots, you've got the 2 hooks, or you've got the 2 uppercuts, yeah? There are variations and hybrids and little adaptations, but there are basically 6 basic punches. And I'd say of those 6, the uppercuts are the ones that are most likely to take you by surprise. And can be the most devastating, when you throw them right.
Yeah, I mean, I defy anyone of those experts to take an uppercut from a 6'9" world champion and just shake it off as if it's nothing.
Yeah, the thing is, you get people saying, "Oh, they should have. Why couldn't his corner work out that he was susceptible to uppercuts?" But it's easy to say that. I didn't see anybody talking about uppercuts before the fight. It's just It's something that the internet generation picks up on and starts posting about. Look at this. Apparently Oscar Rivas also floored him with an uppercut, which I hate to say this. I was at that fight and I don't remember it, and it fell within my sober years, so I don't know. I saw Whyte beat Rivas, after they had the drug test controversy after that fight. But I don't remember Dylan hitting the deck from an uppercut, but they say he did. So that's 4 occasions on which he's been felled by an uppercut. if you count the rebus thing as well.
Just finally on that as well. Finally on with moving to Tommy Fury. I wanted to ask you one question about him. Obviously, he won his fight.
Yeah.
Why on earth has he called out Jake Paul following that victory? Is it like it must got to be money? I don't understand it. I was quite frustrated by it because we're gonna have to go through it all over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's his best way of getting ridiculous money. He probably feels, because what people said after he pulled out was that, you know, the internet troll brigade, and if you're in a Jake Paul situation, you're maximising your kind of availability to such people the world over. They said he bottled it, didn't they? That's what they were saying, that Tommy Fury has bottled it with Jake Paul. And there's probably an element of him, regardless of it being a bit embarrassing for a serious pro fighter to be so entangled with a guy like Jake Paul, you know, and the thing that's provided his trajectory. There's probably a degree of honour as far as he's concerned, isn't there? You know, that he thinks, well, I'll show them I wasn't scared of him, I'll destroy this guy, you know. But I don't know. I mean, with Jake Paul, you know, while I obviously have total contempt for the whole idea of him, there are certain things he's done, like give some of his purse to fighters on the undercard, that makes me think, well, maybe do I need to have a think about his influence in boxing before I completely rubbish him? Could he be a positive force promotionally because he's got the audience down, he's got the money? If he comes from that value base where he wants to give some of his money to Amanda Serrano or whatever because she's not earning enough, maybe he's not to be completely hated. But as a fighter, obviously, he's not seriously, you know, a fighter. He's not got any great ability, and there shouldn't be. I mean, you hear him talking about Canelo and all sorts, you know. But I just think we live in an era where we've lost the plot, you know, don't we? I would sooner mobsters continue to control boxing than to have the place flooded with YouTubers and opportunists.
Yeah, Connie.
Well, Simon, Connie.
I had because I was muted. I had a conversation with someone yesterday about Jake Paul, and they said something similar. They were sort of maybe readdressing what they think of him as he did. You know, could he be a positive influence on boxing? And what I said was, if he matures in the similar way to what his brother has over the last 2 years, then I think he can be. Because if you, I actually watched the Logan Paul podcast with Dana Whyte, who's the UFC president, because I was just quite interested in what they were going to talk about. And actually, I found myself finding Logan Paul quite bearable, and actually he was not as much of an idiot as he was a few years ago. And I thought, do you know what? If you combine that change or that maturity with the things that Jake Paul has said, and I don't mean the stupid trash talking and all the things that he's done and said, that side of things, but the things he said about helping female fighters get more promotion, getting UFC fighters to get paid more, and you know, these types of things, which as fans we've been talking about, you know, for a long time. Maybe there's a chance. I don't want to say there is, but maybe there's a chance that he could do something.
But I find anything other. I mean, Tyson Fury is, you know, a borderline great heavyweight, and deserves all the props that he's got, and he is a phenomenon legitimately. I think, you know, Tommy Fury I'm still rather, you know, skeptical of, really. I think it's more of a bandwagon thing, and the same thing with, you know, John Fury, the dad, who's obviously, you know, he's living vicariously through his son's kind of celebrity right now, and he's got his own air of celebrity, and he's enjoying that because it was something he wasn't able to achieve when he was a boxer, you know, because he was ordinary or even not very good, you know, which I mean, some people, I don't really know John Fury. I know Peter Fury, he's a good guy, nice guy, good trainer. I don't really know John Fury. Some people tell me that he's a good guy as well, which, you know, I've got no reason to doubt them. But I don't have a great deal of interest in seeing the father, you know, live out his dreams vicariously in that spotlight, and I'm skeptical of the brother at the minute as well, you know, until he showed me something a bit more substantial than what he's shown up to now. Well, I didn't see his fight last night, by the way, but people told me that the dad was still screaming instructions, overriding the actual corner. That's one thing I did hear.
Oh, right, okay. Very quickly, Ben, I got 2 questions for you before we let you go. First question was, I'll do the Fury question first. Am I correct in saying that you don't regard Tyson Fury as one of the best heavyweights of all time?
I think you've got to judge people on their resume. When you say best, what do we mean by best? If we say greatest, I say not really yet, no, because he's had 5 world title fights. I think he'd have been a very formidable proposition to anybody in history. But this is the thing. Everybody tends to base it on head-to-head as opposed to resume and body of work, which I say what you're doing effectively by taking that position is you're basing it on hypothesis and who he might have beaten rather than who he did beat. So, for instance, let me break it down. I don't want to hear people say, "Nah, them heavyweights from the 70s, they're too small to beat Tyson." So what? So you think Joe Louis couldn't have beat Tyson Fury? I say, well, that's neither here nor there to the question of who was greatest. Joe Louis made 25 title defenses. He beat 8 Hall of Famers and he fought 10 Hall of Famers. That it absolutely pisses all over Tyson Fury's record, resume, and body of work. And it literally means nothing to me that you think if you somehow could get them to time travel and meet somewhere in the middle around about 1976, then Fury wins. And then some other people throw in these hypotheses. Yeah, but what about if you put Louis on that much vaunted modern nutrition and leveled the playing field? And forget all that. Judge them on what they did. Never mind what they might have done hypothetically in something which could be pure conjecture and endlessly debated but never ever resolved. Let me break it down then. Okay, so Muhammad Ali, you basically say who did you fight and who did you beat and who beat you when you were anywhere near your prime. So let's just talk on the first aspect of that question. Muhammad Ali beat Liston, Frazier, Foreman, Shavers, Lyle, Patterson, Chavallo, Cleveland Williams, Quarry, Bonavina, and I could go on, right? Ken Norton. Fury has beaten Klitschko, Wilder, Whyte, and Chisora. I'm not taking the piss. I'm not being unfair. If anyone wants to go to BoxRec now, tell me a really notable name that deserves to be named on par with the guys I named about Ali, right? So when you look at the body of work, how can you consider him now? And then some people say, you know what? Oh, yeah, but he's dominated his era. That's all you can do. You can only beat who's around the time he's dominated his era. Well, to me, dominating an era is Joe Louis being champion from 1937 to 1949 and making 25 title defenses, or even Larry Holmes being champion from 1978 to 1985 and making 21 title defenses, or Muhammad Ali making 20 title defenses in 2 separate reigns, 64 to 67, then again from 74 to 78, and beating everybody in between who was a top contender before he got that second shot back in the day, including 3.5 years out because he opposed the American government and wouldn't take the draft. That, to me, is dominating your damn era. Beating Klitschko in 2015, then disappearing for 3 years with your own trials and tribulations. I get that, and it's inspiring to see him come back. And if you want to call it the greatest comeback in boxing history, I'm not going to argue too vehemently. But then you come back, you beat a couple of also rounds. Then you draw with Deontay Wilder. Most people thought you won. Then you go on the road a little bit and beat another few guys who don't really add to anybody's resume or legacy. Then you come back and beat Wilder impressively. You defend against Wilder, then you defend against the ultimately limited Dylan Whyte, and you're telling me that he's the greatest heavyweight in history. That's some people are trying to say that today just because he's so bloody big. Please no. Does that cover it? Please
tell me you got a teleprompter.
Is that a no? Is that a no?
Did he have a teleprompter? How did you do that?
No,
I get the impression that he said that before.
I wanted to do this live on my Facebook tonight, and I probably still will. But I remember thinking, if the guys ask me about it first, and they will, I'm going to shoot my bolt because that was what I wanted to put on Facebook, like that. And I don't think I'm going to nail it quite as good if I do it again at like 10.
We got to clip that. We got to clip that.
Yeah.
No, I like it.
Do you mind? Do you mind actually?
Yeah, no, I'll clip that.
I haven't done this before, but on this one occasion, would I be able to screen grab this bit and use it with a link to the show?
Yeah, crack on.
Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah. You crack on.
Cool.
Right. Last question, Ben, before we let you go. I wanted to actually, someone else sent it in. They wanted your opinion on Campbell Hatton. I think he fought a week ago or a couple of weeks ago, and apparently not impressive, I think was the description that he said. But he was interested in your view because I saw a lot of comments saying never going to make it, all the usual sort of things. But I was kind of interested in what you think, in what you've seen so far.
I think the kid's just not got it, ultimately. And I think, he's been put in a privilege. It's a double-edged sword. I know that, because people say you've been given all these opportunities and you've got a silver spoon kind of context in your boxing career because you've been put on that platform straight away because your dad is a boxing legend. Other people say, and they've said it about Conor Benn as well. So other people say, no, it's worse. There's more pressure. There's more expectations. You're in the lens straight away. And I hear that. But it's a better problem to have than toiling in total obscurity when you're actually really good and you don't get an opportunity. Well, yes, there is pressure. Yes, there are expectations. But I think we'd all prefer to be given maximum opportunity and remuneration, and we'd take the criticism that comes with it rather than being on the outside and not being able to get a break. I think we can all agree on that. So he's still in a privileged position. I don't think he's good enough to win legitimate titles. There's no doubt he could win various titles because there's so many spurious ones available in professional boxing today. But I don't think he's got the requisite talent and the skills to improve much more than what he is now. Somebody said to me, there's a guy called John Buster Keaton who was like a British cruiserweight champion, and he may have even won more than that. He was definitely British champion, and he was one of those Brendan Ingle fighters from the legendary Sheffield gym. And he said, when I said that the kid just basically hasn't got it, he said to me, I disagree. He said I had no talent. He said I had fuck all talent. And used to, was a goalkeeper, really, stop punching my face. He said, but I was determined. I wanted to do it. And, he said that if Andy Holyfield said it once, a good attitude will take you a lot further than talent. And I agree with that. So that is the caveat to what I'm saying, that, if he really wants to get there with hard work, he can keep improving. And with the kind of people he's got behind him, he should be able to still do well. But I think he's been rushed into the pro game. And some of the things he does are really, really worrying and disquieting. The way a lot of my friends in the know say, as soon as he fights a puncher, he's an accident waiting to happen because his chin's way in the air, hung out like a weather vane, and he just makes some basic mistakes. And if he does come up against a decent puncher who can crack a little bit, he's going to be in trouble. But
has he had many amateur fights, Ben?
No, he didn't have a whole lot, Simon. He didn't know, and that's the thing. He did, the best amateurs still tend to make the best pros. Not always, there's exceptions on both sides of that. But if you look at most of the great fighters or the elite fighters today, for instance, if we went through the line, most of them had a good amateur pedigree. And it's more like the exception proves the rule, the ones who didn't. And I think that is a big factor too. Conor Benn, Conor Benn didn't, and people thought he was pretty limited at first. Conor Benn is looking kind of awesome lately, isn't he? And, and I think you have to take him seriously. You do have to. He's not been matched ultra tough, but you've got to take Conor Benn seriously. He's not. He has come out the shadow. He hasn't come out the shadow of his dad's achievements, but he's come out of the shadow of his dad's aura, at least. He is Conor Benn, who we take seriously as a welterweight contender. I don't think that will happen with Campbell Hatton, but
stranger
I can't
things
see it. I really can't. I think Conor Benn was always better than that, to be totally honest with you.
Interesting. I've just remembered one other thing, Ben. Sorry.
Right.
Joseph Parker versus Joe Joyce was announced. Who have you got in that? I find it quite an interesting matchup.
I've heard about that today. I would tend to feel Parker has the skills and the versatility to win that fight, and the ambition still and the experience. The only thing with backing against Joe Joyce is he seems to keep winning, even when you think someone's going to beat him. To be honest with you, I actually thought Joyce would beat Dubois, so I didn't pick against him on that occasion. But Joyce strikes me as one of those fighters that you might pick against, and he continually proves you wrong because he's so strong and relentless. And maybe Joe Joyce has got a bit of stardust attached to him. We're getting into the realm of something mystic now, but I remember once that Manuel Stewart was talking about Oscar De La Hoya, and he said he's a child of destiny and you don't want to be messing with those. He said Muhammad Ali was 1-1. So even going into the Ike Quarte fight, Emmanuel Stewart said, from a boxing perspective, Ike Quarte is supposed to beat Oscar De La Hoya, But Oscar seems to have this thing that's protected him, you know. And he's, I remember Gary Jacobs was on the same show and he said it's nonsense. It was all, you know, just American bollocks. It's like, what do you mean he's protected or he's got some, you know? But I kind of do believe in things a little bit more, you know, some of the invisible things in this world. And maybe Joe Joyce has got a bit of that kind of thing attached to him, you know. So from a boxing perspective, Joseph Parker should beat Joe Joyce, but I have a funny feeling he won't do.
Yeah, like Joe Joyce just keeps winning, and sometimes there's just these fighters which just find a way to keep winning. And, Joe Joyce, by the way, seems like a really nice bloke. He seems like a really sound guy, so I kind of am pulling for him. But I mean, you know what, Parker's I tend to agree with you. That I just think Joseph Parker. My initial reaction is I think Joseph Parker will win, but I kind of agree with you in that Joe Joyce just keeps winning, and you wouldn't be surprised if he was to pull it off either. It's an interesting fight, though. Right, Ben, we'll let you go, mate, because we're going to just quickly go through some UFC from last night and stuff. So appreciate you, as always, giving us a bit of extra time tonight as well.
No worries, boys. Okay, I'll see you soon.
Yes, indeed. Cheers for your time, Ben.
Cheers,
Thank
Ben.
you, mate.
Cheers.
Ben Doughty, again, with the facts. Love it.
I should perhaps not be shocked anymore, but it just bewilders me.
That was a good one, though, that was.
He just went on, man. I thought, oh, wow.
He reeled off a load of fighters. This is incredible.
Yeah.
Right. So, because I wanted to give Ben a bit of extra time because I was fascinated by, I wanted to get his take on a few of those different things. We have got less time because I've got to speed it along, mate, a bit today. So, you're gonna have to go quick with the the
Can we just mention a couple of things on the Bellator?
Yes, you can, mate.
A really good female bout between Kish and McFarlane. Amazing fight. You know, for people who have real interest in MMA, this is one to watch. Really backwards and forward. Kish was winning the rounds, but it was not going always her way. But great grappling exchanges, great striking exchanges. It's a sort of really good female bout to watch. Both of them show real promise to create legacies in their own right if they continue to choose to stay into the fight game. Brilliant one to watch. I just want to make sure I get these names right as well. Someone that I've always had my eye on, I thought was always really good. In fact, both of them was Stotts versus Archuleta. Both of them really good wrestlers. If Archuleta was coming forward with seemingly better cardio and better game plan, really pushing with the strikes on Stotts, then normally you see Stotts overwhelmed with striking and shoots and takedowns and grappling control very early on. He kind of runs through his opponents. Archuleta was kind of trying to do that to Stotts, and Stotts was left looking a little short in return in what to do. But Stotts never stopped believing in himself, even though he's on the receiving end and only slightly losing the rounds. Stotts ended up catching Archuleta with a lovely shin kick to the top of the skull, rocked him, jumped on top trying to do the ground and pound. Of course, the ref steps in, which I think was a legit stoppage, even though there's a little bit of fight perhaps left in Archuleta. I think it was a foregone conclusion he was going to lose. But that Stotts, real amazing timing on some of his shoots, absolute talent. I don't want to say get exposed, but he got made to look more human by that Archuleta. But two fantastic fighters and a really good fight to watch. And of course, Cyborg. Wow, I mean, she's just showing that even though after so many fights, such a long career in the combat arts, not only MMA, but wow, she just continues to impress. Her striking, as we all know, is really good. It's very powerful, technically very crisp. But she's now been introducing some great wrestling know-how, both defensively and counter-offensively, and showing some grappling skills as well. And this fight was just great. But of course, it takes two to tango to make a good fight. And hats off to Blenchkow, brilliant performance in return. Had me on the edge of the seat watching it. And at all times throughout the whole fight, it could have perhaps gone the other way all of a sudden because they were standing in a pocket, both throwing down with some real mean-it shots. Again, anyone that's a fan of MMA and mainly follows UFC, switch over to Bellator to watch the fights that I've just quickly reviewed. You will not be disappointed.
Yes, indeed, mate. Bellator's been doing some really good stuff recently. It's been excellent.
Yes, they have been. Very, very enjoyable.
Right. So for the first time ever, mate, I haven't watched the UFC from last night. I just didn't have any time, and I had a meeting earlier, and I just haven't had time. I watched some of the Bellator, and I watched the boxing. I just did not have to. I just couldn't. So I'm going to watch it actually as soon as we finish, because I want to watch the Clay Guida fight, and I want to watch the main event as well. So I'm going to watch it now. But I'll leave you to kind of go through. I'll read out the results and stuff. So we had Charles Jourdain defeated Lando Venata via guillotine choke submission in the first one.
I mean, I thought this was going to be an absolute strike fest. I think anyone seeing their two names going to be competing each other, I think you're going to see a flamboyant kickboxing match. And indeed, we saw brief exchanges of striking, which were looking really good. But it was Lando that initiated the wrestling with some lovely takedowns and lovely positional control as well. We saw a couple of exchanges on the ground, but strangely, maybe or maybe not, we saw Jourdain get his opportunity, sticking in this guillotine, taking both legs of Lunday, and there was just no way out of it. They kind of fell to the side, so it was sort of like a mounted visual position, although they was both to their side. But he had this guillotine in. I think at one point as well, Landy was putting his thumb up, the ref saying, "I'm okay." Then very, very quickly, he wasn't, and he was tapping. So, I was not expecting Jourdain to win in this fashion. I think we all could sort of agree was probably going to see some kind of finish on the feet, if not going to decision in a fantastic display of striking skills. But we wasn't disappointed because the exchanges were beautiful, both on the feet briefly. The wrestling exchanges were beautiful. The ground exchanges were beautiful. And we saw a really nice, sexy finish as well. Brilliant. Definitely not seen the last of either of these two. They're great entertainment to watch. Win, lose or draw, you're guaranteed to have a good fight with these two. They're fantastic to watch. But great to see Jourdain back on winning ways. And he's pretty high up on the ranks, right? I
think he's
must be
got to be up there. I think he's not. He's not in the rankings.
Because he had a long time out, didn't he? And then he had that comeback fight which he lost. And now he's back on winning ways, but he'll be back up there.
Yeah, I think so. So then next we had Macy Barber, ranked 14, defeated Montana De La Rosa by unanimous decision.
Barber was amazing in this, and don't get me wrong, De La Rosa had some really good spells as well, but Barber was just on form, physically strong, had her defensive wrestling, her counter wrestling all in check. The exchanges in the striking were both sure-footed on both accounts, to be honest. I would say Stella Rosa perhaps was trying to do more flamboyant things, more traditional jiu-jitsu things to try and put the fight away. But Barber was having none of it. Anti-jiu-jitsu aspects were really on point, and she was just aggressive with those elbows in striking and striking off the break. Really, really good, like I say, with her wrestling, which seemed to take a little bit of physicality out of De La Rosa. She just had everything in place. It was a brilliant performance. I'm really excited for Barber. She's got some great trajectory now to push her through and maybe even to the top. She showed really promising skill, heart, and maturity in this fight. And I'm really excited to see her fight again. I hope she fights again real soon, because I've got a feeling some great trajectory behind her right now. And I think she will start believing herself to be unstoppable. And indeed, it could prove to be the case. I really think kind of excited about the prospect of this one now.
Yeah, she's been on a bit of a tear, and she's been doing real well. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. Where she goes next. Next up was the one I was really looking forward to, which was Claudio Puelles defeating Clay Guida via knee bar 3 minutes into the first round. I can't wait to watch this, I've got to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's won by knee bar more than once, I think, before this fight. He's becoming known to just nail these knee bars in exchanges. And sometimes I feel like wrestling background orientated guys are kind of like primed to be rolled through on to catch these knees bars, because obviously they use their feet to base against a jiu-jitsu guy so much, but therefore they do leave themselves a little vulnerable against He's sort of like a swift no-gi specialist who can whip under and take these legs at the blink of an eye. And that's exactly what happened. Initially, Clay Weeder was looking great. He shot in, kind of fluffed up his takedown a little bit and started getting into grappling exchange. It wasn't looking good for him, was it? He was very nearly put into a triangle and then an armbar, then an omoplata. But he showed great jiu-jitsu awareness in terms of anting the jiu-jitsu. Survived it, started to look like he was going to get counter from the the failings of those chains of submissions that Claudio was putting on him. And I thought, right, okay, Clay Guida's going to start taking over, especially with his cardio, and he's just going to be aggressive from the get-go as soon as he broke free from those submissions being on top. It was a foregone conclusion. You would think that he was going to go on a rampage on top and be really, really proactive. But no, Claudio had something up his sleeve, flipped him up, whip underneath his leg. I'm going to have to watch it again and try to find a way to slow it down because it was so quick. But that knee was bowing the other way. I just hope Clay Guida wasn't injured through it and he gets to fight again. But wow, how do you deal with that? I mean, you just have to try avoid the ground, I guess, with this guy, because I'm sure if anyone gets on the ground exchanges, you're going to be nervous for those knee bars because they look nasty. They look really nasty.
Yeah, I love it. I love a knee bar, mate. So I'm really looking forward to.
You won't be disappointed for both fronts. You know, they both were performing brilliantly. They both really, really was. But you know, Claudio's just. Yeah, sharp as a samurai.
High level grappling, mate.
Oh yes, it was very much so, very much so.
And then another submission. It was Submission City last night on the UFC card. The main event was number 1 ranked Jessica Andrade defeating number 10 ranked Amanda Lemos via submission arm triangle choke. 3 minutes 13 of the first round. Yeah, we did briefly talk about this last week, and I think you were steering towards Lemos for the victory, and I said, no, I've got a feeling Andrade is going to do it. I've been lucky enough to be in the warm-up room on 2 occasions where Andrade was in there, and got a little inkling of how her mindset is before going out. Very, very confident young lady, and likes to drill hard in the warm-up room. So you can see by the way that she warms up on the both occasions that I was there that, you know, she has a game plan when she goes in. You know, she's not going in there mindlessly battling it out or just running on instincts, although that is part of the equation of a fight, of course. But yeah, she's very articulate about the way she wants to approach each individual bout, or therefore it seems. Andrade was very, very impressive. We saw a different version of her, didn't we? Because she had to respect the striking skills of Lemos. Lemos is incredibly dangerous and also rangier and taller than Andrade. So Andrade wasn't just going to go in and overpower her like she has done with previous opponents. There was going to be real consequences if she fluffed up her entry. But my goodness, you know, she was patient. She did receive a nasty leg kick, but she rode that out. And she picked her time. And when she got into the pocket and had a couple of exchanges, it was almost the same way that Jordan picked up the standing arm triangle position before jumping to the back. She got this standing arm triangle position, pushed her up against the cage. Now, you know, sorry to keep mentioning about Jordan, but Jordan had this against Hughes. He had the standing arm triangle position up against the cage, which obviously makes it hard or therefore almost impossible to jump onto the back from there. But you can use it for a great setup to land knees or complete the submission standing. Why not? And she did try to get it to the ground, but Lemos showed great versatility of her potential base and balance and staying up on her feet. But she didn't need to take it to the ground. Andrade just pressed up against the fence and noosed it in tight, and the referee jumped in. The referee must have seen Lemos literally start to go to sleep because he touched them both, and Lemos literally dropped to her ass. So she must have literally just been passing out. But what a performance from Andrade. I really think she's reached her peak that I'm sure she's going to enjoy for a few years now. I think she's really on top of the world. Amazing performance. I'm really excited about that performance. What a go. And you've got to remember, she's been effective in more than one weight division as well, which is really, really impressive. Great work. Buzzing. Superb, mate. Yeah, it's another great UFC card, mate, by the sounds of it. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm that I was not able to watch it and then ultimately discuss it with you a bit more. Next week,
Can I just say, because I was so good at doing it really super fast. The other one in UFC that I watched, which was a really good fight, was Jordan Wright against that Mark Andre. I'm going to butcher his name as we both do. Barriol, I think is. I'm just going to call him Mark Andre. Didn't go on very long at all. Wright was kind of doing the right things. He was staying out of the power of Mark Andre and landing outside and inside leg kicks. At least that what it appeared to be his strategy, which I think was, fairly sound. Wright started getting some successes with the shoots and takedowns, and it was looking pretty good for him. He showed some real good know-how in the grappling, but then went for a high crutch sort of single takedown, left his head and neck on the outside, and Marc Andre started noosing up this guillotine, and it started to look nasty. Drops down to his back, flips him over, lands into a mounted position, and Wright had nowhere to go with it. But it was just unusual that we ended up with two versions of mounted guillotines in terms of the person who's being guillotined having both their legs tied up in the guard. Got flipped over and got choked out. Devastating for Wright because he was kind of performing well, but goes to show how good Marc Andre is or any of the fighters these days. You make one mistake, that could be the mistake that leads to the finish. In this case, that was the case. But it's just another really good one that people can go and watch because there was a lot that happened very, very quickly, and it's not a simple one to watch. It was over in a matter of a few minutes, but a lot happened in that time.
I like it, mate. I like it a lot. So obviously there's more UFC next week. Got Rob Font versus Marlon Vera and Arlovsky versus Jake Collier. So two good fights there straight off. Just having a look if there's any other.
Who you got out of Font? I'm going to go Font on that one, although that's a.
Yeah, I think I'd go Font. I would go.
I think Font might be. He'd have to use every aspect of his MMA. I think he has to mix up his strikes, takedowns, and grappling. I think he's going to have to use clever strategy to put it in his favor to win. But I think he's pretty clever fighter. I think Font can do this.
Yes, 100%. And we're not far away now. We are literally 2 weeks away from Oliveira versus Gaethje, Namajunas versus Esparza, Ferguson versus Chandler, Royo versus the OSP, Cerrone versus Joe Lozon. It's going to be incredible. However, Danny, you need to remember that weekend, so not next weekend, but the weekend after, we need to do the show on the Monday.
Yes, that's fine. As long as I've got a little bit of notice, it makes it simpler for me.
It's my wedding anniversary on the 8th of May, and I'm pretty sure I'm away that weekend. So I can do it on Monday, but I cannot do Saturday or Sunday.
I don't know whether you was intending to do it tonight or whether we can do it next week, but there was questions that needed answers that you sent to me on WhatsApp.
Oh, I think what we'll do, mate, I think I'll do them next week. Simply because of one, I can't access my WhatsApp at the moment because my computer's being funny, and also because it's been quite a long one. I'd rather do it like a bit earlier in the show. So I haven't forgotten. I will do those questions. Well remembered, mate. That was good going.
That's okay.
But we'll get stuck into them next week on the Brock Lesnar stuff and that. As always, Danny, a pleasure, mate.
Yes, and Ben and the young lady Lauren. It's been a really, really good podcast, as they all are. But I've been left kind of buzzing from this one. Really enjoyed it.
Interesting. Yeah, it was a good one tonight. Spread the word. And, of course, you can download the audio version from a bit later on. But until next Sunday, we bid you farewell. I got loads of shows out this week. Next one, there's a Patreon show out on Monday. And there's My Story Tuesday with music producer and artist comedy beats. That's Tuesday, 8 o'clock. Thursday, Rodri Gig Show. All sorts of channels and stuff on the channel. So check it out. Until then, we bid you farewell. Good night.